What is up, fellas? We are back. It is Saturday, and we are breaking down the Week 14 running back tier list, going through everything you guys need to know to set your fantasy football lineups at this position. A lot to get into today. We have a number of teams on bye: Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson, and Javonte Williams. All of those players are unavailable at the running back position, and we do have a number of injuries to go through. So we are going to have to be digging deep this week because Breece Hall is dealing with a major knee injury. By the sounds of it, he is listed as doubtful for Week 14. Hopefully you guys listened to Tuesday's video where I talked about mustache running backs and Braylon Allen ranked very highly. So with Breece Hall probably out, it looks like we're going to see Braylon Allen work as the starting running back, maybe Isaiah Davis mixing in a little bit there. Kenneth Walker is the other major running back injury that we have to talk about. So the top two running backs from the 2022 class, both dealing with some stuff here. Limited practice on Wednesday for Kenneth Walker, downgraded to did not practice Thursday and Friday with two injuries, an ankle and a calf. I'm going to do the tier list as if Kenneth Walker will miss this game because typically when you're downgraded to a DNP Thursday and Friday, it's not good news, but I will let you know right now that he would be a back-end RB1, high-end RB2 if he were suiting up and if he were playing for this. But for now, I do have Zach Charbonnet ranked as if he will be the starter. By the time you guys are listening to this, you may already know the answer whether Walker is going to play or not, but if there is any updates, I will leave that in the pinned comment because as of now, it sounds like he's truly a 50-50 questionable type of guy going into the Week 14 slate. We also have a couple other injuries to talk about. Of course, Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason expected to be placed on IR, and I believe they already have been. PCL injury for CMC, high ankle sprain for Jordan Mason, which means Isaac Guerrero will see himself ranked pretty highly in this tier list for the first time all season. Roschon Johnson and Zamir White both listed out for Week 14. Concussion for Roschon, calf injury for Zamir White. Alexander Madison is listed as questionable for the Raiders, but looks like he is going to track to play after logging 3 limited participations in practice this week. So getting into the locked-in running back starts, right? Running backs 1 through 12 this week. You guys probably know that you should be starting these guys, but just to give you guys a little bit of advice on who's got good matchups, bad matchups, and who's in high-scoring games, you guys can see the elite running backs who are in good matchups this week. We got Saquon versus the worst defense in the league at stopping the run, the RB1 in fantasy going up against the best matchup. Watch out for a nuclear 40 bomb here. If you guys are playing Saquon Barkley, I apologize in advance that you probably are losing this week. Tony Pollard versus the Jaguars, easy matchup. Bucky Irving, assuming he's suiting up, easy matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. Kyron Williams versus the Bills. Chase Brown versus the Cowboys. Alvin Kamara versus the Giants. And James Conner versus the Seahawks. If you have any of these players, expect a big performance this week because they have pretty good matchups. Elite running backs who are in high-scoring game environments. Of course, we already saw the Thursday night game of Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs. Both of those guys having very productive weeks. Jacobs finding the end zone 3 times. Jahmyr Gibbs getting it done through the passing game. Chase Brown going up against the Cowboys on Monday night. That is a 49.5 point over-under, so a great matchup for him. Kyron Williams and James Cook, both in the same game, 49.5 point over-under. Saquon Barkley, Bucky Irving, and Bijan Robinson in their respective games. We got 45 or more points in those ones as well. Elite running backs who are in bad matchups. So if you guys do have these players, maybe temper expectations efficiency-wise. You have Bijan Robinson versus the Minnesota Vikings. They are second against the run in adjusted fantasy points allowed there. So Bijan maybe a little bit of a sketchier matchup for him. Josh Jacobs versus Detroit. Of course, he wasn't super efficient on the ground, but he did score 3 times. So that's obviously going to help you if you play Josh Jacobs. James Cook, tougher matchup against the Rams. Devon Achane, a little bit of a tougher matchup versus the Jets, but he gets it done through the passing game. And then Gibbs, same thing for him against the Packers, but he was able to do it via the air. So those were my locked-in running back starts. Again, at this point in the year, there's not really any, usage to talk about because we already know basically what the workloads are across the NFL. So getting into high-end RB2 range, and this is going to be a lot of new names that are normally not in this range because of the injuries, the bye weeks that we have this week. Zach Charbonnet versus the Arizona Cardinals, 20th ranked run defense. Charbonnet is being here basically because I think Kenneth Walker will be out. I am predicting that. It has not been officially said. In my experience, when somebody is downgraded from Wednesday limited participation to Thursday did not practice Thursday and Friday, that usually means they suffered a setback, and that usually means they're going to miss the game. Now, again, if there's any updates, I'll leave them down below in the comments. And if Zach Charbonnet is not the starter, meaning Kenneth Walker is ruled that he's going to play, this is where Kenneth Walker would rank as well. So the Seahawks start starting running back, is my RB13. Zach Charbonnet, if he is the starting running back this week, was a workhorse in weeks 2 and in week 3 when Kenneth Walker was last out. 95% of the snaps in week 2, 85% of the snaps in week 3. We saw 2 top 8 finishes from him. That is why I ranked him as one of the best handcuffs in fantasy in Tuesday's video. Hopefully you guys picked him up if he was available. The Cardinals are a beatable run defense, man. Charbonnet will likely get 15 plus carries, 4 plus targets in this game, and we've seen that be the case anytime Walker has been out, dating back to 2023. If Walker ends up playing, like I said, Charbonnet will move way down in my rankings. He'll probably be about RB30 in my rankings, so keep that in mind if you do have Charbonnet. He does see a bit of an upgrade even if Walker is active, but it is most likely only going to be a huge upgrade if Walker is out. So running back 14 in my rankings, we have Aaron Jones versus the Atlanta Falcons. They are 10th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. The Falcons defense is not susceptible to the run game. They are a lot better against the run than they are against the pass. They're top 12 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, and specifically versus zone run schemes, which is what the Vikings operate, they are 11th in the NFL in missed tackles forced allowed and yards per carry. So Aaron Jones, a little bit of a tougher matchup on the ground for him. Jones randomly had his snaps cut to 51% after getting back to his full workload in week 12, and this could be another game where they shy away from the run game if it isn't effective. So with Aaron Jones, randomly spiked down in usage. I actually kind of like him to catch the ball quite a bit in this game, so I like him to go higher than his 17.5 receiving yards over on Underdog. I think that is a little bit lowerly priced because of the workload we saw last week. 4 plus targets in 3 of his last 5 games, 4 plus targets in 6 of 12 games this year. And like I said, if you're going to beat the Falcons, it is going to be via the passing game, pass-heavy game script probably coming for Sam Darnold and the Vikings, who are beatable through the air. So running back 15, the next guy on the list here, we have Braylon Allen versus the 26th ranked Miami Dolphins. Again, another handcuff getting a shot to start. Breece Hall listed doubtful in week 14. We got a glimpse of what this would look like last week when Breece were he was limited, only posting 61% of the snaps. In that game, we saw Braylon Allen command a good amount of volume on the ground, but keep an eye on Isaiah Davis, who may steal some receiving work away. So I wouldn't imagine we're going to see Braylon Allen be a 80% snap share guy. He's probably going to be 60 to 70% with Isaiah Davis working in, 40, 50% of the routes. Regardless, you have a defense giving up the 5th most total touchdowns to the running back position. So there's a very good chance that if Braylon Allen is the starter, which it appears he's going to be, he has a chance to find the end zone against the Dolphins, who basically are just the type of team that you can run the ball against. And I actually like Braylon Allen to go higher than 13.5 carries in this game, because I do think this will be a close AFC East type of battle here. And I think if the game stays close, Braylon Allen can clear that rushing attempt mark. No problem there. So running back 16, we have Isaac Guerendo versus the Chicago Bears. They are 25th ranked against the run. So as I talked about in the injury section, Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey, both on the mend for the rest of the year. Next man up is Isaac Guerendo, who I'm sure was the hottest waiver ad of the season pretty much of the last couple of weeks. We saw Guerendo get a shot at the starting job back in week 8 on Sunday Night Football. Jordan Mason came into that game with a shoulder injury, didn't really play a whole lot, and we saw Guerendo play 66% of the snaps, finishes a top 10 running back that week. In that game, he rushed 14 times for 85 yards and a touchdown, plus 3 for 17 as a receiver against the Cowboys. He is going to close out our pick'em entry because I like him to go higher than 15.5 for his longest carry. The Bears are 25th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. They allow the 4th most rushing yards per game, and Guerendo has multiple big runs this season. We've seen him slide down at the 1-yard line a bunch of times because he's breaking off these long runs. He's a big dude, 4.33 speed. I like him to go higher than 15.5 for his longest rush because in the 2 games he's had more than 10 carries. He's blown this number out of the water with big plays, and he averages 5.9 per tote on the year. So I really like him to go higher than this longest rush total, and that will close out the entry that we're building here. If you guys do want to tail it, you can use this link in the pinned comment down below. New customers over on Underdog, which is where we're playing this, can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash on their first deposit at sign up using the promo code FSE. And you also get this Justin Herbert free square to make this entry a 10x if it ends up hitting. Again, if you want to tail it, link is down below in the pinned comment. But moving on to my running back 17, on the week, that was David Montgomery, who locked into my running back rankings on Thursday night. Played on the Thursday Night Football Thriller, same workload as usual, but he did end up scoring 19.4 PPR points on the back of touchdowns, which is what we know David Montgomery is capable of. I had him ranked a bit lower due to the matchup because the Packers are about a league average run defense. But as always, David Montgomery is always going to be a high-end RB2, low-end RB1 depending on the matchup. And with the spike week that we saw from him, that is exactly what we got. So closing out this tier of running backs, we have running back 18 for me, which is Tyrone Tracy versus the 27th ranked New Orleans Saints. So a pretty easy matchup for him this week. He did have like a pretty good game against the Cowboys, all things considered, because the Cowboys were kind of blowing the Giants out in that game. It's an easier test versus the Saints, knowing that A, the Giants are at home this week, and B, the Saints are pretty much just as bad as the Giants are, at least maybe slightly better than the Giants, and they are bottom 6 against fantasy running backs in terms of adjusted points allowed. So this high-end RB2 range, all 6 guys that I've talked about here are loaded with great options, with good matchups, and hopefully for those of you guys that had a bunch of bye weeks and a bunch of injuries, you got some fill-ins off of your waiver wire in Braylon Allen, in Zach Charbonnet, in Isaac Guerrero. Tracy has had back-to-back days of under 9 carries in bad losses for the Giants, so hopefully the Giants can keep this game close against the Saints. Hopefully, like I said, for Tracy's sake, they can keep it close for the majority of the game. Again, the Saints aren't a overly daunting task of a team, especially without Taysom Hill now. They don't really have a whole lot of weapons outside of Kamara, so I think this game will probably end up being a close one, and Tracy can get there as a result. So low-end RB2s, running back 19 for me is DeAndre Swift versus the San Francisco 49ers. He is entering this game questionable with a quad injury that caused him to be a DNP, and limited practice on Friday. Roschon Johnson, as I mentioned earlier, already ruled out with a concussion, and that would be an upgrade to DeAndre Swift if he wasn't dealing with an injury himself. If you guys are really down bad at running back this week, go pick up Travis Homer. He may be usable this week if Swift is a surprise inactive, or even if just Swift is limited to some capacity. Swift saw a great workload last week, but didn't do a whole lot with it versus the Detroit Lions. The 49ers on paper seem like a tough opponent, but they've been an average team and an average defense all year. So you should feel comfortable starting DeAndre Swift, assuming he is healthy, and he does play at 4 o'clock. So make sure you have other plans in case he does get ruled out last minute. Running back 20 for me is Rico Dowdle versus the Cincinnati Bengals, who are 8th ranked against the run. They play on Monday Night Football, so he could be a pivot option for those of you guys that may have Swift. Last week's game set up for Dowdle so perfectly. It was a blowout win versus the Giants. Dowdle can salt the game away against the team that has basically quit on the season. This week, we have a potentially high-scoring game boasting a 49.5-point over-under against the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think all of us would probably agree that the Bengals are the better team than the Cowboys without Dak Prescott. But the tough thing is that Cincinnati is not the team you want to run the ball against. You want to pass the ball against them. So the volume on the ground could be much less fruitful than the 22 carries that Dowdle saw last week or the 19 carries that he saw 2 weeks ago. But the Cowboys are at home. They're against a team that finds ways to lose. So maybe this game stays closer than we're thinking. And it could end up being another game script for Dallas. But regardless, Rico Dowdle is getting a great workload, and he's getting some receiving work too. So even if they do phase him out of the run game because it's not effective, they probably will throw a couple passes his way as well. So running back 21 for me, Isaiah Pacheco versus the Los Angeles Chargers. We saw on Black Friday that Isaiah Pacheco came back, and in the win over the Raiders, we saw the first look of him since week 2 when he broke his fibula. They eased him really in a little bit. He only played 33% of the snaps, but with extra rest coming off of a Friday game with more practice time, I expect the snap share to go from 33% all the way up to like 50 or 60% based on what we know about Isaiah Pacheco and the fact that he is the lead back here. He only had 8 touches last week, but I do think he'll be around 15 to 20 this week, so that should match better output as well. The Chargers are a really tough run defense. They're 5th against the run in adjusted fantasy points allowed, but the saving grace is that this game kind of profiles really well for Kansas City. The Chargers don't have J.K. Dobbins anymore. Ladd McConkey's coming into the game banged up. If this is the type of game that I think it's going to be, which is, the Chiefs do their thing and they win this game and salt the game away with Isaiah Pacheco, that will end up being really good for Pacheco's volume, which is why I have him ranked RB21 this week. RB22 for me this week is Chuba Hubbard versus the Philadelphia Eagles, 6th ranked run defense. The Bucs shut down Chuba Hubbard last week, and I fear the run game may be neutralized again versus the Eagles' elite run defense and elite defense in general. The workload hasn't been an issue for Chuba Hubbard, especially the last 2 games that Jonathan Brooks has been back for. But you have to wonder that after fumbling the game away in overtime against the Buccaneers and Jonathan Brooks going from 9% of the snaps in his first game to 21% of the snaps last week, do we see yet another ramp up for Jonathan Brooks and he makes this backfield a 55-45 split? Still in favor of Chuba, but that would be a big dent in Chuba Hubbard's workload, especially in a bad matchup. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen for sure. Maybe it's still Chuba Hubbard's backfield. He plays 75% of the snaps or whatever, but we could see a shift in his workload. So keep that in mind if you guys have Hubbard. I have him ranked semi-conservatively here at RB22 because of the matchup and because of what happened at the end of the Buccaneers game. Running back 23 in my rankings is Najee Harris versus the Cleveland Browns. Excellent week last week. We saw the biggest week of the year for Najee Harris. He had a monster game against the Bengals in that shootout. The Browns stuffed the crap out of him in week 12 in that snow game on Thursday Night Football. This game, though, is in Pittsburgh. That game was in Cleveland, and Jameis is buried in the 1 p.m. window, so he doesn't have to do his Jameis theatrics in primetime. I got a feeling that the Steelers take care of business in this one because the Browns have not swept the Steelers since 1988, which was the year that my parents got married, so it was a long time ago, and they haven't beaten them in Pittsburgh as well since the early 2000s. So this is a game that profiles really well for the Steelers. They're probably going to win this game, and that bodes well for Najee Harris on the ground. It is the 7th-ranked run defense that did stuff him in Week 12, but Jaylen Warren was effective in that game, so the run game can definitely work against the Browns. It just was a little bit tougher sledding 2 weeks ago for Najee Harris, but I still feel pretty good about him this week, and maybe, honestly, I could move him up a couple of spots ahead of Chuba Hubbard and ahead of Isaiah Pacheco even. So running back 24 is Rachaad White versus the Las Vegas Raiders. They are 30th against fantasy running back, so very, very bad defense against the run. It's a good enough matchup for the Bucs run game that both Bucky Irving and Rachaad White can both be RB2s this week, and I mean, they've both been RB2s on the season. Bucky Irving coming into this game banged up. I wouldn't be shocked if we see White encroach on his workload just a little bit more than we've seen it in the past couple of weeks. I still have Irving ranked highly, and I'm not super worried about the injury, but generally speaking, knowing Todd Bowles and knowing this team like I do, I would not be shocked if Irving is managed a little bit and has only like 15 to 18 touches, which, again, is usually what he has, but Rachaad White might have a bigger workload here than he normally does, and again, it's a great matchup, so I wouldn't be too worried about playing Rachaad White. If you guys are scared about playing him because of Bucky Irving's workload, I think he's going to have a pretty decent game. Running back 25, getting into my next tier of running backs, the flex place tier, is Nick Chubb. And this tier is going to take a big-time hit because of all the injuries in the bye weeks. Nick Chubb versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, Nick Chubb had a great week 2 weeks ago against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday night. But as I just alluded to with Najee Harris, I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns are behind big time in this one. And I would expect the Steelers to make this game script one that favors Jerome Ford and not that favors Nick Chubb, because we know when the Browns are losing, it is the Jerome Ford show, and when the Browns are winning, it is the Nick Chubb show. So I would expect Nick Chubb to be kind of downgraded as a result. The touchdowns have carried him the last 2 weeks. He was on his way to a dud last week against the Broncos before he scored a receiving touchdown. And then 2 weeks ago against the Steelers, he was inefficient, but he still scored the ball twice. So again, if he finds the end zone, I'm sure he'll be fine, but that's pretty much the only way he pays off in this matchup, because I don't imagine that the Browns are going to win this game. I can't imagine this game even really stays all that close. Maybe I'm doubting the Browns, but I just think that's how it's going to go in a game in Pittsburgh at 1 p.m. there. So running back 26 for me is Travis Etienne versus the Tennessee Titans. Tank Bigsby made his return last week, and so did Trevor Lawrence for a brief period of time. Tank Bigsby ate into the snap share big time, 46%. Immediately took Travis Etienne really in a way that he's now viewed as like a flex play at absolute best. Trevor Lawrence now out for the year means the offense is borderline unwatchable. I would love to bury Etienne even further than this, but the reality is we have a number of guys on bye and we have a number of guys injured, so I can't really rank him any higher. Etienne does get some volume in a game that's going to be like a divisional showdown between two bad teams, so the Titans are not like the type of team that are going to blow the Jaguars out, so I'd imagine this game stays relatively close, and Etienne can maybe find the end zone or catch some passes in this one. But regardless, I don't feel overly excited about playing him. Running back 27 in my rankings for me here is Jaylen Warren versus the Cleveland Browns. Quietly has 10-plus PPR points in 4 straight games. Again, I've already talked about this game 5 times, but the Steelers should take care of the Browns, and that means that Jaylen Warren is going to have a lot of volume on the ground for both him and for Najee Harris. Last time they played the Browns, Jaylen Warren finishes a top 10 running back with 15.4 PPR points on the week. Running back 28 in my rankings here is Gus Edwards versus the first-ranked Kansas City Chiefs. So Gus gets carries and nothing else. We know this about him at this point. Without J.K. Dobbins, this run game is kind of a mess, to be honest. Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins take the routes away and the targets away from Gus Edwards. You're basically praying that he falls into the end zone because the Chiefs are nails against the run, so we can't expect 18 carries for 140 yards. Like I would be highly, highly shocked if Gus Edwards has more than like 50 rushing yards in this game, and I can't imagine you're getting too much efficiency. So if he is not getting the efficiency, not getting the carry volume because they can't run the ball effectively, it is probably highly likely that you will need a touchdown from Gus Edwards. Otherwise, he is not going to be very useful. Running back 29 in my rankings is Alexander Mattison versus the 16th ranked Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Plug your nose, flex Mattison if you're desperate, because he's been limited all week in practice, which is good because it looks like he's going to play this week. Zamir White is out, and on Black Friday, Mattison was close to playing and ended up being ruled out last minute. He's getting an RB2 workload anytime he's on the field, especially when Zamir White is out of the lineup. So the Bucs, league average run defense, they can be had, and Aiden O'Connell played well enough last week that you can imagine they're going to move the ball on offense. There may be scoring opportunities for Alexander Mattison. I know it's disgusting. You got to plug your nose when you make this play, but 15 touches or more from Alexander Mattison is going to be a startable option when there's 8 running backs out with bye weeks and injuries this week. So I feel pretty good that Mattison is a decent, low-end flex play or whatever, but again, if you're starting Mattison, it's not great. I just think he's going to actually get some touches. Running back 30 closing out this area, and like I mentioned, if Kenneth Walker plays, this is where Zach Charbonnet would be ranked, but as of now, I'm expecting Kenneth Walker to be out. Kareem Hunt is my RB30 on the week. Again, I expect his workload to probably go down even more after he, cratered at 40% of the snaps last week. Still got the majority of the carries over Pacheco. I expect that to flip this week, and I expect Pacheco to have a bigger workload, which is why I have him ranked down here. And then again, the deep league flex plays. I mean, it's getting gross. If you have to play a running back here, you're probably not going to be in a very good spot this week, but I understand with people having Breece Hall potentially out, Kenneth Walker potentially out, you might have to dig a little bit deeper. So if you have to start Tank Bigsby, Ray Davis, Tajay Spears, Jerome Ford, Trey Benson, or Jonathan Brooks, I don't think it's outrageous that you'd have to do that. Again, all of these guys have a variety of factors, but what they all have in common is that the starter ahead of them goes down during the game or visits the medical tent for a couple of quarters or whatever. They would be a huge beneficiary. I always prefer to play guys like this because they have more weekly upside than Justice Hill or whoever you want to talk about as far as like a pass catching specialist. Again, if you wanted to throw Travis Homer into this mix as well, you could probably do that because of the DeAndre Swift injury and the fact that Roschon Johnson is out. But regardless, it is not a good situation. If you are playing one of these guys, you're probably better off playing a wide receiver in your flex, like pick up Ray McLeod off of the waiver wire, pick up Brandon Cooks off of the waiver wire, pick up Trey Tucker off of the waiver wire. I would rather play guys like that over these running backs in your lineup because at least with those receivers, you can expect some big play upside and so on and so forth. So not a great week for the running back position. A lot of injuries, a lot of buys. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments. I will try and answer as many as I possibly can. If you do have the inclination to tail our entry that we built out on Underdog Fantasy, you guys can go to the link in the pinned comment down below. Sign up on Underdog using the promo code FSE. When you sign up, you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You can tail our entry, and if you want, you can add in the Justin Herbert free square to our entry to make it a 10x if it ends up hitting. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, comment any of your thoughts down below. Rest of season rankings, dynasty stuff, all available over on flockfantasy.com. You can get your team reviewed. You can ask us trade questions, ask us start-sit questions. Head on over to the site, use the promo code FSE for any of those things for a nice 30% discount. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.